Welcome back to another episode of the Hodge-Cast. If you're living in the UK, chances are you probably don't trust law enforcement these days. I'm sure you've heard the phrase two-tier policing, or maybe you're of the belief that there's corruption from top to bottom in the police. Well, hopefully during this interview, we're going to be able to unpack that and identify some potential flaws, fact and fiction in those previous statements. As today, I'm joined by former police officer turned author, Jay Darkmoore. Welcome to the show, mate.
Thank you very much, man, the microphone. You know, considering you said that you probably butchered that opening monologue, I think you did quite well there, actually.
Well, I appreciate that, mate. Yeah, it's a lot more difficult when you don't have a teleprompter. But listen, well, let's dive straight into it. I found out before we started filming that you've wrote numerous books, but this one in particular, which is a great book, highly recommend, and quite aptly titled The Job's Fucked, The Secret Diary of a Police Officer. So before we divulge into your time in the force, tell us a little bit about that, because you was a science fiction writer, or fiction writer as well.
Yeah, so I wrote quite a few different books. I originally started, my inspiration for my first book was actually a case dealt with in the police. And I interacted with a guy who I can only describe as the worst human being I'd ever dealt with. He was a business owner, multimillionaire, and he spoke to and treated everybody around him like utter shit. And I was quite new in service. When I went to interact with him, he spoke to me in the exact same way. So me being very, very upset about how this person had treated me and spoken to me, I then decided to write a murder mystery about his death. So what that consisted of was I invited about 12 friends over. I wrote an entire script. I wrote an entire story. And I thought, okay, this is, we did the night and everything else. So it was dead cool. So then I thought, well, I've got the makings of a book here. I've got characters of it. So then I wrote my first book called The Space Between Heaven and Hell, which was a horror book. Then from there, I wrote some more compilations of short stories of horror. And then I thought, okay, well, let's explore this a bit more. So I wrote a short series called The Everlife Chronicles, which was a sci-fi dystopia. And then what I thought I like writing books. I like writing this sort of stuff. Never got much encouragement from colleagues. They always thought it was really funny. Oh, you released a new book. Oh, great. I need more toilet roll. Funny enough, them people...
very, very creative, yeah.
Yeah, they're funny enough, them people I know where to be seen now. But yeah, so I then started writing crime fiction, and I wrote a series called the Detective Law Warburton series, and that did well. And then once I'd left the police, I thought, I had experience in writing, I had a bit of an audience, there was a lot I wanted to say, and I thought, what's a great title for a police memoir? And that is The Job's Fucked, because that is what you hear. And not only that, I thought that title gave me a bit more credibility, because that's something you don't really hear or encounter if you're actually in the police or you're in that service, because that's the common phrase you hear officers saying, the job's fucked. So that's where the title came from. And that's a bit of my background when it comes to writing. But I'm writing another one called The System's Fucked. And that's a much more over-encompassing, thorough view at the criminal justice system as a whole.
Is that going to be a follow-up?
That'll be a follow-up, yeah. So that's the first non-fiction book I wrote. The first non-fiction book I've written, and then the Systems Fucked will then be a follow-on from that, yeah.
Okay. Because that does go into detail, which I'm sure we're going to chat about in depth today, just how fucked, as it were, it is. So the fact it's potentially even more fucked is probably more concerning. I want to talk, sort of like get a little bit of your origin story on joining the police, but for those who, we've been chatting now for about 5 minutes, probably worked out we're both Northern, so we may need subtitles for this, especially with our American audience, might struggle to understand. So Warrington is where you reside now. Have you always lived sort of Warrington ways?
No, so I lived, I was born in Salford. So I have been eyeing up the valuables in this room. Okay. So born in Salford, I'm laughing. Born in Salford, lived there for a couple of years. I then moved from Salford following my uncle being murdered. So what happened was my mother's side of the family were involved in organised crime. There's a funny story actually. So I heard of a story where my uncle and my granddad, there was a co-op at the end of their road. So they went and did an armed robbery at this co-op, but it was snowing. So when they've ran back with all the gear and stashed it all in the house, the police turned up and they literally just followed the footprints of the them two back to the house, and then they both got nicked for it. So not the cleverest of criminals in the world by any stretch of imagination. But so as the story goes, my uncle was murdered by organised criminal gang, and then my dad was also involved in that kind of world as well. So he was so the body of my uncle was put into a car and transported somewhere else, and then my dad was given the task of cleaning out the car so that the people didn't get caught. Anyway, he didn't do a good job. The guy was caught, so then my dad fled down south, never saw him again. He was a heroin addict, and that was his story. He died when I was about 20. The officer in the case, who was the family liaison officer, who was liaising with the family during the inquiry and everything else, ended up actually then developing a relationship with my mum, and then two got married, something which would never happen now. So that happened. So then the result of that, we then moved to Bury. We lived in Bury for about 9-10 years. Their relationship broke down, very volatile time in my childhood. And then my mum met the guy she's with now, and they've been together ever since. And following that, I then moved to the Wigan area. And now I live around the northwest Warrington area.
Warrington area. So how did you, so you mentioned the kind of, describing the, I guess, like a role model, as it were. Was that the deciding factor for you joining the police?
It was definitely part of it, yeah, because I used to like when he'd come home and he'd be in his uniform, and he was a very kind man. I still speak to him now, still a very kind man, very, very, to his own detriment, really, which we could potentially get into. But yeah, still he was a strong man, like a figurehead, and I really respected him coming home. He was a provider, he looked after the family. And then, funny enough, joining the police, there was that aspect of it as well. But one of the biggest reasons why I decided to join was I ended up having a lot of interactions with police officers. And the reason why I had those interactions was because I used to be a white van man. And I used to get pulled over quite a lot.
Could go anywhere.
I used to get pulled over quite a lot for speeding, being on my phone, stuff like that. I basically, 19 years old, being handed the driver's license. I probably shouldn't have been. So I used to get pulled over quite a lot. Never got points though. Always managed to talk my way out of it or chat to the officers.
You just got pulled potentially because you looked a bit suspicious in a white van?
Well, that and probably running red lights, speeding, being on my phone. I got caught on my phone 4 times, never got points.
You never got points?
Never got points.
Okay.
The only thing I ever got done for was I wasn't wearing a seatbelt once because I was multi-dropping like a courier. So I got pulled over for not wearing my seatbelt. And they did the typical thing of, you know why I pulled you over? I went, yeah, I wasn't wearing my seatbelt. And they was like, oh, were you not? Oh, okay, then there we go, have this ticket. So I got pulled over for that. I got a course for that. And then, yeah, just general daft shit, driving issues. And then just as a result of that, I just got chatting to loads of bobbies. And I thought, you seem all right, you know, considering my mum's side of the family as well, having lots of negative interactions with the police. My parents couldn't believe it when I actually said, you know, I'm applying. And then I went through the application phase, failed the first time on vetting because of some stuff which I didn't know about, which came up as a result of family stuff. And then managed to then finally get in the second time. And that was 2014, I believe. 2014, yeah, 2015. And then I left September 2024, so September last year. So we did just under 10 years.
So obviously you mentioned there that you failed the first time. How difficult was it for you? So because I'm going to go with the notion this was just based on your thought process closer to the time in terms of the interaction you had with the police when you was getting pulled. This wasn't like a childhood dream or anything. It wasn't one of them. I want to be a police officer.
No, I mean, like I said, I always respected my mum's husband coming home and being in uniform, and he'd tell some stories about, he's helped this person today, or someone's ran at him with a sword today. He's tackled someone with an axe. So it all sounded very exciting, and also quite fucking terrifying at the same time. Well, I was quite young. Them two split up when I was about 11 years old. So certainly in adolescent years, had no intention of joining the police whatsoever. And then in my early 20s, that was when I was a white van man. Then had a lot of interaction with the police, generally
just stimulated you from
generally overwhelmingly positive. And I thought, you know what, I'll just try the volunteer police, because I don't know if you know, there's two types of police officers. There's volunteers and then there's your full-time officers. They both have the same powers. They both look exactly the same. Unless you know a little bit about maybe collar numbers and insignias, you wouldn't ever really tell the difference. And yeah, so I joined the volunteer police, and then I joined the full-time police in 2018. So I did just under 7 years full-time, but a total collective of 10 years. But it was never like a childhood dream. It was just something which kind of developed over time. And every stage I passed, I was like, this might actually fucking happen here. I might actually get in. And then the fact, you know, I did all my fitness tests and vetting and everything else. When all that got cleared up, why I didn't get in the first time. And then, yeah, I managed to get in. And I was like, fucking hell, doing cartwheels around the house. Like, I'm gonna be a Bobby.
Yeah,
it's absolutely incredible.
So two things I want to unpack there. So I want to talk about you mentioned the fitness test there. This is just intrigue on my part, is what does that entail? And has that sort of floundered over the years? Has that sort of been a bit easier to pass the fitness test now? But then also, before you answer that, give us kind of like an A to B of what your roles were for your whole tender in the police.
Okay, so I was always front facing. I was always frontline. Near the end of my career, I'd say the past 18 months, albeit still frontline, I wasn't necessarily on the radio. I moved to a more investigation role. So for the first 8 years or so, I was 999, someone's ringing up, you know, you go on and you deal with whatever you deal with. Appointments, you would carry a workload. You'd be a day-to-day ordinary front-facing officer on response, which I actually really enjoyed. I enjoyed going into work, not knowing what you're going to face. I enjoyed dealing with real victims, being able to help people, but it was very much putting plasters on things. It was, you turn to this, you deal with that, you put in your referrals, next job, then the next job, and so on. Sometimes some shifts could be quite slow, other shifts, entire sets could be your feet just didn't touch the floor. Plenty of times I've come home and my girlfriend said, what have you been to today? How's it been? And I literally could not tell her anything what I'd been to, because it was just one after the other. Adrenaline spiking, then adrenaline dumps, eating shit food because you're trying to grab a bit of something for subsistence. You're chatting to one victim who's telling you the worst thing in their life, and then you have to go off and deal with something else before they've even finished because of how limited staff are and how high demand was. So I dealt with those. That was most of the career. And then the last 18 months was when I really started to realise the kind of issues in the system as a whole. Because when you're on frontline, you do now, but when I was on frontline, you didn't really necessarily see the cracks in the system because you were so busy. And when I was frontline, you were able to make your own decisions. You were able to to turn up to an incident and make your best judgment and use your national decision-making model and go, what is the best outcome for this person? What's the best outcome of the situation? That has very much been taken away from officers now for the benefits of senior leadership team, which we can get onto later. So I primarily dealt with a lot of domestic violence cases. I was very good at investigating them. And I think that's because some people love going out, locking people up. Some people like drugs. Some people like stopping cars. I really liked investigating cases of DA. And the reason why was because, one, my own dad was violent towards my mum. I've been through it myself with an ex-partner. And imagine what's the biggest impact of somebody's life. They're living with an abuser. They're living with like a terrorist in their own house. Someone who's judge, jury, and executioner. And if you can take that, if you can stop that and you can help that person, that on a micro scale can have such a huge impact on somebody's well-being and life. So that was my passion, dealing with that. So so got some really good results as a result of that too. But I also saw quite a lot of nasty, unethical things going on as well during that time.
So we'll circle back to that, the fitness. Mm-hmm. So how difficult was it for you or for police officers during that time to pass a fitness test compared to now, or has not much changed?
The fitness test, not much has changed. It's 5.4 in the bleep test. Okay. and that's it. There's no.
So they've not changed that at all.
So what they've done is when you initially join, it was every year you did a refresher, and it was 5.4 on the bleep test. You do like scenarios and stuff and everything else, but your actual initial fitness test and your refresher was always 5.4 and still is 5.4 in some forces. What a lot of them done now is they've reduced that to 3.7. So for your standard officer now, they only have to hit 3.7 on the bleep test to be declared fit for duty, to be able to, be fit enough. And it's something to do with some scientists have done some VO2 max fucking research or whatever. Someone who's probably never actually worked a day in police in their life and realised burglars don't run 10 metres, then stop, then run another 10 metres and then slowly get faster. And I actually challenged this. So just before I get on to what I was going to say then, so 3.7 is like your standard. Then if you carry a taser, it's 5.4. If you carry, if you're a riot officer or you're like a specialist, like a dog handler, it's 6.3 or 6.4. And then if you firearms, it goes up to 9.4. I mean, my brother's in the RAF and his fitness test, I believe, is about 11. And he just fixes planes. So the fact that they're saying a firearms officer who has to carry all the gear has to get to 9.4, I don't think it's good enough. So what I did was I always basically slag off the police fitness test and say it's not hard enough. So what I did was I then decided to find 4 really hard fitness tests around the world, and I did them all back to back. So I did the New Zealand police fitness test, which was really difficult. I did the Australian police fitness test. I did the New York fitness test, and then I did the SWAT team. So I did them all back to back, and I was tired, but I'm like, if I'm relatively fit, I'm not a fucking athlete, but I was able to do them back to back, the UK police fitness test has to be much better. But one of the reasons why I think why it's so low is because if they made it harder, less people would get through it.
Well, that was going to be my next sort of question, because obviously we are going to talk on like DEI or EDI or whatever they phrase it these days, and I feel as though that could potentially be a sort of something that can bridge the gap for that. If they make the fitness test easier, it then becomes easier for people to join the force. But I interrupted you there, mate, so I'll bring you back on track. You was talking about you did all these various fitness tests.
It was just, I just did it recently. It was just for a bit of fun, just to see, how tough is it. I also did the Russian Special Forces fitness test. Okay. I did not pass that.
Yeah, I think I'd struggle with that one.
Out of 7 or 8 different things, I think I passed 3. That is another animal altogether. But I'm going to train to try and do it all properly. Okay. But I just think, in the army, I think in the army you have to hit, I don't know what it is, but it's much harder than it is to join the police. But I would argue the police have to be fitter and more capable than in the armed forces, because I remember I was speaking to a friend of mine who used to be in the army, and he said, I've seen your videos, what you've done. I've seen the things you've done about the police fitness test. That's ridiculous. And plus, when you're in the army and you're facing a combat situation, something like that, there's multiple of you and you're all armed. You might be a police officer, turn up to somebody's house, and they might just fucking pull an axe on you. And you're in their house, they know where the weapons are. You're potentially on your own. You have to be trained to a much higher standard because of how dangerous it is. Yeah, okay, you've got a stab vest and you've got a radio where you can shout for assistance, but it might only be 5-6 minutes until support can get to you. Now, if you've ever been in a scrap, 5 or 6 minutes is a long ass time if somebody's trying to rearrange your legs. So the police fitness, it has to be so much better.
It's interesting that, because as you were talking there, I mean, obviously I've never worked for the force, never worked for the army, but I would wager you're likely going to be in more combat situations in the police than you will be in an army. I mean, most of the time you're kind of training or preparing in any sort of military endeavour, whereas you've just hit the nail on the head in the police. You need to be on your guard. You might get a call for something that doesn't seem that particularly challenging. You get there and could be some psychopath pulls out a knife, and you've got to be prepared for that.
You're not dealing with nice people. You're dealing with the worst kind of people society has to offer, and you're dealing with them a lot of the time. And with how police numbers are now, often you're dealing with them on your own. So, like I said, you might be able to shout up for backup if backup's available. But it's like when it comes to single crewing. I remember speaking to someone, and they said, "No, police are always double crewed." It was like, they're not. Often cops are on their own. And you're at so much risk of something going something going wrong. You're just massively putting yourself in harm's way. There was an incident what happened in my old force where there was a cop out on his own. He was getting assaulted and his radio won't work. So he's getting his fucking head kicked in. He's trying to call for help. It's not working. So he had end up managing to pin the bloke to the floor. And he had to ring 999 and say, I'm an officer, I need support. So even though they can turn around and say, police officers have the support available at the click of a button, sometimes that button don't work. With all the will in the world, sometimes technology fails. That's why you need somebody there with you. It's like, as well, stop searching. If you stop search somebody and it's just you, chances are they're probably with other people. So while your eyes are focused on this person who might pull out a knife, as has happened to colleagues of mine, where they've been stop searching somebody and then they've just whipped out a screwdriver and gone at them. You need that person to watch your back, to watch, are they going to reach for something? Is one of their friends gonna fucking pull something out on you, or so it's incredibly dangerous. And the situations what you can encounter can go from completely calm to so violent and volatile in a heartbeat, which is why I'm a big advocate for better fitness standards. I think officers should be. I think officers should get paid time to do gym work, because they say that you have to be fit for duty, but then they don't give you any kind of specialised time to do it. So I know the fire service, I believe they get paid gym time. Why don't the police? And I think the police should be trained in some kind of martial arts, judo, just something to be able to control someone on the floor, get someone on the floor effectively. I'm not saying you need to be training kung fu, need to be the next fucking Bruce Lee or anything like that. But
it would help,
it absolutely would help. But give the officers the tools to be able to protect themselves better. But I firmly believe that the organisations don't care enough about the officers to be able to actually want to invest the time and money into them to protect themselves, because most officers will leave within 3 years anyway. So why do they need to invest all that time and money and energy into keeping officers when it's actually better for the force if they've got a healthy churn, as it's referred to? Because if an officer serves 4 years, then they're leaving before they get onto the full pay scale, so it saves the force money. It means if they paid off the training, and it means they're not, the forces have to keep paying out a pension when they retire. So why does the police service, why does the organisation need to make good, robust officers when they don't even view it as a long-term career anymore?
Yeah. And it's interesting because, obviously that phrase gets bandied about quite a lot. If you do a job, you're just a number. And I suppose in any career, in any vocation, that is applicable. But I think with the police, they need to kind of steer clear of that, because, like you've just touched on, the turnover's not good, and we'll unpack this more later on, but the turnover's not good. What you'd want someone to be in that profession who you could put your trust and faith in, and why not give them all these additional perks for the job, i.e. improved fitness, i.e. I completely agree. I think learning a combat sport is a complete skill in a situation where you like that, where you can defend yourself.
I think it should be mandatory as well. I don't think officers should have a choice, because if you have to be able to, even if you don't want to get hands-on with someone in a controlled environment with colleagues, what you see going to be on a Friday night when there's some coked-up bloke who wants to kick the fuck out of you, you tell him to stop, you tell him to move back, you can talk to him all you want, he wants to fight, and guess what? You've got to grab hold of him. If you're not willing to do it in a controlled situation, what use are you to your own personal safety, your safety of your colleagues and safety of your public, and also public perception as well? That officer's running away from that guy. Why? That officer's scared. Police are weak. Give the officers the tools to be able to deal with situations like that properly.
Well, it's like, reputation. Obviously being from the north, and sure this applies to other places in society as well. But me growing up, you kind of had what was labelled cock of the year, cock of the school, which in layman's terms is the hardest man or woman of the school. So it's that reputation, I'm not going to mess around with Rob, because he's chances are he'll rip me head off.
Cock of my school's a very, very good MMA fighter now.
Well, there you go. Yeah. So, and I just think it's having that reputation. You don't want to be seen as, the police are they're a bit of a laughing stock at the best of times in 2025 in the UK, at the best of time. So why then take away the potential reputation of, okay, yeah, they might be a bit of a laughing stock, but we can maybe argue that's coming from above. The frontline officers, I don't want to mess with them, chances are if they pin me down, they'll probably choke me out.
Officers that get sacked now. It is. So we have this thing now where we want stronger officers, we want more robust policing, but then when we see it, the cop gets sacked and the media go crazy, we can't want officer police brutality, and there's people there with the fucking mobile phones. So in one side you're saying we want to reduce violent crime and stop search people and reduce knife crime, and we want robust policing. But then when that happens, the officers are getting scrutinised. Officers are being hung out to dry by the organisation. Yeah,
it's a bit of a...
Sorry for interrupting you, by the way.
No, feel free. You're the guest, I'm the host. Yeah, it is a very... the lines are very much blurred, and I think that's why people can't put the faith and they can't put the trust in police. And as you touched on, you're dealing with a whole array of characters, let's say. And this book highlights, early on in the book as well, it highlights a lot of case studies. Some that I've picked out that I need to get you to unpack, because some of these are just mental. So tell us a little bit about the time you got a call about a stolen vibrator, was it? Or?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, so... that's happened a couple of times.
Oh,
funny
right.
enough.
So this isn't just an isolated
So
theft of a vibrator.
I think the one I referred to in the book is one I heard of, where there's been a domestic incident. It was a same-sex relationship, two women. They'd split up, and one of them rang up and said, "Oh, by the way, she's nicked my vibrator." The other girl then got lifted, her house searched and everything for this vibrator, but it was deemed not in the public interest to prosecute someone for that.
Was there anything else on that call, or was
no,
it just
I think that was
solely
it.
specific for a stolen vibrator?
I'm sure that was it.
Okay.
And the one I dealt with, it was my second ever arrest. I remember it. It was a burglary. But that wasn't just the theft of the vibrator. He'd nicked some other shit as well. And I can just imagine he's going around the bedroom going, I'm going to have your jewellery apart, I'm going to have this. And while I'm at it, I'll have this as well. So next time you go for a wank, you're gonna be upset that you don't have your bullet.
And keep it. I mean, you'll notice the theme with these ones are picked out, by the way. But keep it on the theme with it. There was a time with a bag of dildos. Is that right?
Oh, big bag of dicks.
Yeah. So
that was
tell
funny.
us that story.
That was funny. Right. They don't tell you about any of this shit when you join. And some of the stuff which you talk about.
I think they probably, if they're struggling with staff now, chances are if that was on the interview, you'd
they
probably
might tell you about
more.
a big bag of dicks or the poo toilet, the glass toilet poo watch, which we can talk about as well. Yeah. But yeah, so big bag of dicks. So the phrase "a big bag of dicks" it's like to describe something negative. Oh, today was a big bag of dicks, that sort of thing. Never once did I think I would actually encounter a big bag of dicks.
A literal
bag of dicks.
Okay.
So what happened was a neighbouring force had locked up a lad on suspicion of a burglary. When he got locked up, he had a suitcase with him. So as he's going into the van, I turn around to him and I go, "Well, you've been travelling anywhere?" He's like, yeah, sort of, yeah. Anyway, we get back to custody. And when someone has property on them, everything in the property has to be searched and checked and booked in. So anyway, we're chatting to this bloke and he whips open this suitcase, and the detention officer, bless him, I don't think I saw him after this, to be fair. The detention officer must have been about 60 years old. Now, I'm sure working in custody, you see some stuff, but even his face was an absolute sight, as was mine, as was the custody sergeant's. And this bloke's just stood there as this detention officer is opening up the suitcase. And when I tell you they were dildos, I mean, I'm talking, they were different shapes, sizes. There were some with light things with lights on. There were gimp masks. You name it, this guy was a one-man travelling fucking shag show. Like, he was a male escort.
Okay.
And when he said...
That does, kind of help his cause,
he just nonchalant. He said, "Oh, yeah, they're for my clients," which I found was absolutely hilarious. And the best bit was the custody sergeant must have been having a bit of a wind up with this detention officer, because the detention officer says, "Can I not just book all these in a suitcase of items?" And the sergeant, "No, you have to take each one out one by one and put them in this plastic see-through bag." So then this poor detention officer, this 60-year-old man, is there one just one by one. So
is this the guy who you've never seen since?
I don't think I saw him after that, no. So a big bag of dicks was indeed encountered that day.
Oh.
And that, I think, is one of the funniest things I've ever seen.
Yeah.
The guy was a prick as well. The lad, he started booting off in the van because, I don't know, whatever reason, that he'd been lifted, and he started headbutting the cell, which I've never understood why people headbutt the cell.
No.
Because all it does is hurt you.
Yeah. It is a strange one, that. And then another one as well, which I think maybe was you relaying the story, or maybe you was directly involved, you can elaborate. So your case of autoerotic asphyxiation.
Oh,
so someone,
right, okay.
You found a dead body of someone. So I don't know if people are familiar with that, or maybe you are, but it's basically where you try and pleasure yourself. Sort of the climax is you basically try and choke yourself out to the point you're about to die, but it's a better.
You seem to know quite a lot about this,
climax. Well, research purposes for this interview, mate.
Fucking hell, what was your search history like, eh?
Yeah, so I've never done it. Just put in a disclaimer there. But yeah, so you've experienced someone. I feel like you need to take this weight off me now. So I'm going to hand over to you, Jay. Tell us the story.
Sounds like you're kink shaming to me, Dan. I'm just saying. Yeah, so there's one that I've dealt with which wasn't as extreme.
So this is multiple occasions.
So there's one I've dealt with where a bloke was found naked in a hotel room with a belt around his neck. So he'd gone too far. He'd opened up the wardrobe, tied a belt around it, leant forward. He had like no pants on, so we can only assume what they were doing. So that was one. And then, I think the one I mentioned in the book was one that my mate went to. And he went to one, and it was a guy who had put a gimp mask on, then put a bag over his head, and then I think he'd managed to secure it somehow. So then what he was found in like a hunched over position, and there was dried stuff on him, and I believe he still had his cock in his hand as well at the same time.
So he was dead with his.
He died a happy man. Let's put it that way. And then what happened was, when somebody dies and the police go, they have to tag the body. So you have to tag one arm and the opposite leg for the coroner. It's a tag. You have to write out the incident number and everything else on it. So my colleague was with a more experienced officer who decided to maybe...
the 60-year-old bag of dicks guy?
No, thankfully not. No, he was a detention officer. He wasn't a copper. So the more experienced officer then thought this would be a funny joke. So he's obviously had a look and he's tagged one arm. And then my mate said then had to reach down to where this guy's back leg was, which was quite, well, he said he had to move his dead ball sack out of the way to tag the opposite ankle. And that was that.
We're definitely going to need a disclaimer for this
episode.
100%.
No,
it's a great selling point.
And this shit happens, though. This stuff happens. If you want to hear more
riveting stories, then obviously buy the book. The job's fucked. No, but I just wanted to give a little bit of an insight there as to how the scale of some of these, I know they were quite, for all intents and purposes, funny stories. But you're also dealing with unpredictability, aren't you? Yeah. You don't know what that phone call, like we said earlier on, it might seem like it's going to be, this won't be too bad, we'll go on to it, and then all hell breaks loose.
It's often the other way around as well. It's often the ones you get where they go and it's all kicking off. You turn up and it's, it's kicking off, but it's not as bad. But it tends, the ones I found anyway, the ones where you go, it's, it seems all right, and then you go there and it's like anything but. So you can't always rely on the information from the radio as well, which from what the book says is quite important. In the information, what gets passed over the air, and then how that influences the actions of the officers when they turn up to the job. But sorry, go on. You were saying.
No, well, that'll segue quite nicely, because what we're seeing at the moment in particular, I don't know, you said you left in 2024.
September last year, yeah.
So presumably you did have to go out to a few of these. You can correct me if I'm wrong. Constant calls, because I think I read somewhere the statistics for this was over 12,000 arrests last year for online posts, which of course is everyone's sort of banging the drum of the lack of free speech here in the UK, which of course can be open to interpretation. Two questions really. Well, your experience of that, and what's the reason for that?
So as far as I'm aware, and I have thought about this, I probably have, because I've dealt with that many different things. I don't think that I've locked somebody up for something they've said online. I might have maybe gone over and I don't know, maybe had a word with someone about it, which again, that's still the state interfering with things what people say. But I've certainly interviewed people who they posted something online or they've left a nasty Facebook message. That's how I actually know there was one. It was a domestic related incident where it was two brothers arguing over Facebook. You can see where this is going. So they're arguing over Facebook and they call each other absolute rotten. And then
is this public? Is it, or they messaging?
This is on like a wall or timeline, whatever it's called now. So they've been giving it back and forth and stuff like that. And then one of the brothers gone, when I find him, I'm going to fucking strangle you. So this guy's then gone, and he's rang the police. I went to that and I basically went, I'm not locking up this lad because you two have had an argument and then he's threatened you. Like, I'm just not doing it. Anyway, the guy says, right, I'm going to make a complaint about you and all the rest of it. I'm like, that's fine. So I ring up the sergeant and I go, just to let you know, I'm going to get a complaint at this job because I'm basically not doing what the lad wants me to do. He's had an argument with his brother and they've fallen out. The brother said something a bit nasty. So my sergeant goes, well, he's going to make a complaint, so you should probably just take a statement off him. Right, okay. So then begrudgingly I take this statement. I then go back to the station and I say to my sergeant, I've taken a statement. I'm not doing anything with it. Sergeant goes, well, you've taken a statement now, so you have to go and deal with this lad. I said, right, I'm not locking him up though. So we'll go around to this guy's house and say, come with me. We'll do a quick interview in the basically like a box ticking exercise. We'll get your account. Frankly, even if you admit it, I'm not doing anything with it because it's bullshit. And that's what happened. So he came, he said, yeah, I said I was going to kill him. I'm not really going to kill him. I was just pissed off. So, right, okay, cool. So that got NFA. The bloke then, the victim in this circumstance then complained. It never went anywhere. But that's my only interaction, I think, with actually dealing with a case like that, that I can remember. There are other cases where I've interviewed people for things they've said online, which I've always been like, oh, why the fuck am I even dealing with this? If it was somebody saying, I want to murder this protected group or this person, or somebody had sent a message to an ex-partner and gone, when I find I'm going to gouge your eyes out or something like that, then yeah, okay, that's a bit different. That's a threat. That's not okay. But somebody like I don't know, posting about maybe trans or LGBT or something political, I've never really dealt with anything like that. But the reason why that is happening, in my opinion, is because it's an easy detection. So I know of officers who, there was one, for example, it was two kids on Fortnite. One lived at the opposite end of the country. One lived where we were. Said he made a racist comment towards this lad. He called it a retarded something. What happened then was the officer then contacted that local force to go around and speak to this young lad who was about 13. The lad had to sign something on one of the officer's pocket notebook to say, I'm very sorry. And then that was the case closed. To me, I don't know, how old are you?
34.
Right, so Xbox Live back in the day?
Yeah.
Call of Duty? Yeah. You say fucking all sorts, to people and shit.
It was
a rite of passage.
It was, well, yeah, I mean, I'm not going to repeat some of the stuff
but
I probably said on that as well.
You'd never ring the police. Like, you just say, right, just stop playing that game again, or don't speak to that person
again. Do you think people are so what's the actual ruling on it? Like, what is the ruling on what you can't? Because obviously I know you've got free speech up until the point it's hate speech, incite of violence, or I'm probably going to butcher this, but basically attacking a protected characteristic. What's the actual ruling on it?
The main thing
what
gets quoted is the Malicious Communications Act. That's the main one, which its language is very ambiguous because it's what is considered grossly offensive. So
it's subjective, isn't it?
Exactly. Yeah. So there was a case what I know of where somebody has said, they were talking, they were flirting, a man and a woman, and they've gone, they were talking about fishing of all things. And he said, I can't wait to stick my rod in your pond. Bloke got locked up for malicious communications because the woman found it grossly offensive. And I think he was looking at getting charged for that. I can't remember what happened. But this is the issue with policing language. What you've just described there, we can easily sort of unpack this. I personally wouldn't find that offensive. Wouldn't be the way I'd speak to someone personally, but you've just outlined that I'm not triggered, I'm not offended, I'm not going to phone the police. Yeah.
Whereas somebody else, might find that extremely offensive. So this is where the lines are very much blurred on what's above board. And I think as a result of that, that's why no one, put it bluntly, hasn't got a fucking clue what they can or can't say these days.
Well, when you so when a case goes to the CPS, where something like, there's only certain cases the police can charge. A lot of the stuff has to go to the Crown Prosecution Service. I don't know why, but they need to. You're relying on the subjectivity and the feelings of another person there who's looking at the evidence. Now, you might send a case through which you think that's disgusting what that person said. They need held into account for that. And the CPS lawyer might go, no, I personally, I don't think it is. So it's subjective, and I don't see how we can enforce laws which are subjective. Who makes
the call on that? So I don't, obviously you've got some level of authority at the front line, but you're not a decision maker. How far up the hierarchy does that go before someone makes a final judgment call on? Yeah, we're going to apprehend them?
It depends on what the crime is. So say
so on free speech on this particular one.
Okay, so generally that would always be the CPS.
Okay, because
it would fall under malicious communications, which is an either way offence. So it can be tried in either magistrates court or Crown Court, or it'd be harassment, which generally would go to CPS. Potentially stalking as well. It can depend on the level, but generally it goes to that. Anything hate related, which these things normally are, automatically go to the CPS. And the thing with hate crimes as well is they are, again, extremely subjective. So, and it also doesn't have to be the person. I think I remember talking to you about this. It also doesn't have to be the person who's involved who then decides it's a hate crime. So, I mean,
well, you did speak to us off camera about this. This was that incident where there was a lady, I think she was from the Wirral, had been, I don't know the full story, but basically there'd been a relationship between three people, between her, somebody else, and then the gentleman who was involved. The two girls had then argued with one another, and there was messages sent. I believe he had assaulted her as well.
Yeah.
And then it presented
I remember the one you're on
case. About. Calvin, I don't suppose you can just so we've got the wording on this right, if you can just pull it up, just put arrest for WhatsApp messages, Liverpool.
Oh, she called him a...
It was a slur,
it was a derogative for somebody who's gay. Yeah, she went on Piers Morgan, didn't she? And so it wasn't even, the person who was the target of the slur wasn't even involved in this conversation, but somebody else had said, I'm going to report this, and then it was deemed a hate crime. So this woman was prosecuted for a hate crime. Because she was talking about the guy. About somebody else. Yeah.
And it was over private messages as well. So again, that seems very much blurred in a sense. You give a reference before about two lads arguing over publicly on Facebook. This was private, so is nothing? Can we not even have heated discussions privately now? Or
it would appear not.
No,
because if somebody says I'm offended by that, and then they report it, the police can say, or anybody in that evidential chain can say, I believe that's a hate crime, and then it's deemed a hate crime. So the only other cases what I can see are like that is, so you know when let me try and word this properly. If somebody says something and it becomes a hate crime, it then has to go to an inspector to declassify as a hate crime. In other words, you've got constable, sergeant, and inspector, so it has to go 2 ranks above to middle management, basically, to say this is or this isn't. The only other cases what I can think of what require that level of authority to close it is a domestic violence case. A domestic violence case which, we know from stats and figures that DA can result in homicide. It can be really, really serious if left unchecked. So the characterising is what, by the very nature of what we're talking about, if we follow it, its logical conclusion, is we're saying that this person calling somebody a slur where they're not even involved carries the same level of authority and scrutiny as a potential homicide. I think that's absolutely ridiculous. Yeah. For me, it should only be a hate crime if the victim who it's aimed at perceives it as such. I don't think somebody else, based on their own subjectivity, their own subjectivity should be able to say that's a hate crime or not. Because as we've seen, it can become a hate crime at any point. It could be the call taker who says, I believe that's a hate crime. It can be the CPS lawyer. It can be a supervisor. It can be anybody in that chain who believes it is as such.
So it's an example we could give there is, let's say me and you were in the pub having a bit of banter with the lads. One of the lads uses a derogatory comment, let's say, I'm not going to say a word that, you know, would describe maybe a homosexual or someone of different ethnicity. Someone walks past in the pub, overhears that conversation, they could perceive that as a hate crime,
They
even
could
though it's
report
not aimed about them. And
yeah.
the police have to act on that.
Yeah, the police would, it would certainly be filed. It would certainly, a crime would be generated. Whether that then gets investigated fully.
But the possibility is it could.
The possibility is absolutely there,
Right,
yeah.
okay.
That could happen. It can be ridiculous things as well. So I remember dealing with one case where it was a man was cheating on his wife. The friend found out, and then they did something called a character assassination. Never heard it before. Where basically you say like, you are this, you are that, you are the other. She called him mentally unstable because of his actions and what he'd been doing. He perceived that because I've got bipolar, you are saying I'm mentally unstable because I'm bipolar. Now this makes it a hate crime. And a hate crime's really hard to close. If you're not, so if I get a crime through and I go, this is it's been logged as a hate crime. I don't believe it's a hate crime, but somebody who's been classified as a hate crime. It's really difficult to close because, like I said, the level of authority that's to go through. And they even say, so you have a checklist what you have to do. You did in my force anyway. You have a checklist what you have to go through. And it's, say if you deal with an assault case, it's on the consent of the victim whether they want to press charges or not. Pretty much most of the cases are like that. You need the victim's support to allow the case to go forward. The first thing on the hate crime template was, even if the victim does not want to make a complaint, have you taken a statement from them? Have you taken their account? Which again just has this extra level of, why is it viewed? Obviously hate crimes are serious when it's a real hate crime, a proper hate crime, someone being targeted as a result of a protected characteristic, disability or whatever. They should be dealt with robustly and effectively. And we have to consider the vulnerabilities and the experience of that person. My issue is, if we are criming the slightest thing as a hate crime, then that waters down the serious hate crimes as well. People look at it and go, fucking hell, it's another hate crime. When really we should be looking at it going, bloody hell, we've got a hate crime here, this isn't okay. And that's the same with things such as, say, stalking, for example. So I dealt with, like I said before, I dealt with a lot of domestic violence cases. For me, stalking, it's fixated, it's there's an anagram for it. Fixated, obsessive, unwanted, repetitive. And it's somebody every second of every day is thinking about this person. They are making up excuses to go and speak to them. They're sending flowers to the house. They're following them. They're potentially tracking them. And we know with domestic homicide, I think 98% of all domestic homicides have an element of stalking in them. At least 60%, I believe, have an element of coercive control. Because the police are trying to bolster up their statistics on certain crimes, they will crime pretty more or less anything as coercive control now. And they will also, so all that stuff there counts as stalking, but now it's a case of they messaged them twice. They messaged them twice on Facebook. It's stalking. Really waters down what stalking is.
It seems to be that this whole dilution, it seems to be happening in society as a whole. I mean, here in the UK, the phrase far right or racist gets bandied about. And really, when people know the full definition of these words, racism is horrendous. You know, and people who are purposely derogatory towards somebody else based on the colour of their skin, their ethnicity, their religion is horrendous. But now it gets thrown for something that isn't even offensive, maybe because you don't agree with a political statement that somebody else has made. And it is sort of used, you know, with the right-left divide kind of thing. And then far right, was something that was used to describe the Nazi regime under Hitler.
Yeah.
You know, and now it's being described for someone putting a Union Jack up on the front drive. So I'm using that as a reference because with the hate crime and stalking, it's very much diluted for what the core meaning or what the core definitions of these things are.
It's basically, mate, if we throw enough shit at the wall, more might stick, which makes our stats on this look even better. So say, for example, you get a case of domestic assault. And I use domestics as an example because, like I said, that's what I used to deal with a lot. And it's where I saw a lot of these issues coming through. You get a case of domestic assault. Whereas at one point it might be, okay, it's an assault. It's coercive controlling, it's stalking, it's this, it's that, it's the other. Because that way, if one gets charged, so out of those 5, if one gets charged, all 5 go down as a positive outcome. So it's manipulating figures, it's criming as many things as possible to then make the force look better if one gets charged. And I think that's what's happened now with hate crimes as well, is the slight sniff of a hate crime and going, yeah, okay, we'll get it as a hate crime because then we can bolster up our hate crime detections as well. So you can't believe police statistics because they are manipulated so much, and they're manipulated not to benefit the public, they're manipulated to benefit the force. And in particular, it's often certain senior leaders, people in a certain senior leadership team or senior management team who have an agenda for it. So they want more detections in this certain area, so they'll manipulate the figures to make themselves look better, cause all sorts of damage, whether that's in public confidence, in staff morale, in policing in general. But that's fine, because then when the shit hits the fan, they probably moved to another department or been promoted. It's quite, when we think about the people who are actually in charge of our safety, not the officers on the ground. The officers on the ground do a fucking hard job. And I always say this, every criticism we have of the police in general, it's never against the bobbies on the ground. They do an impossible job with very limited resources, incredibly unsafe. They get shit on, pay's gone down by 21% in the last 10 years, something like that. It's not them, it's the people above them. It's the senior leadership teams. It's the ones who are in charge of entire departments, who are looking at their own promotions, their own pensions, their own pay packets, and they don't care who they harm, be that victims, be that members of the public, or like I said, public confidence or their own officers. As long as they're all right, that's the main thing. It's very, very narcissistic, very self-obsessed, because you get these quite psychopathic leaders who, funny enough, join the police and probably have very little empathy for other people other than themselves. A lot of them try to get off frontline as fast as possible. They will then climb the promotion ladder, stepping on anybody who gets below them, manipulate stats and figures in order to bolster their own careers. And then when someone complains about it, they either get told to shut up, or they're seen as a bit of a problem, so they get moved, or they may have their own career opportunities clipped as a result. So there's a bit of a culture of, you can't really say anything about what's going on. A lot of the mate, I got messaged today by a copy who had 18 years in. 18 years now is rare as rocking horse shit, because so many people are leaving. And it's like, the Police Federation put out something which should be frontline news all over. Up to 10,000 officers a year are estimated to be leaving the service soon. So within 10 years, 15 years, there'll be no bobbies left. The only reason why we can sit here now and have this conversation is because there's people out there now who you'll never hear about doing amazing things. We only ever hear about the bad shit when maybe there's a corrupt officer, or there's an officer who's abused their position for sexual gain, or, some awful piece of shit has managed to get in and abuse people. And then that casts a massive brush, and they go, well, all officers are clearly like that.
Well, that's what I was going to say. That's a stigma, isn't it? It's the ignorance of people. Like, another example we could give of that is, just yesterday there was a terrorist attack on Bondi Beach in Sydney.
It's awful.
But people now will attribute all Muslims as terrorists. So it's the same scenario, is because you highlight on the... See, I always use an analogy, you could have 1,000 things go positive for you. one negative thing that tips you over the edge.
Yeah.
You know, I think I used this in another example in another podcast. You know, the comment section, you can get loads of positive comments, but it's that one negative one that sticks you. Doesn't matter about all this good stuff that's happened. So it's the same in real life as well. You know, the frontline police, what people need to remember is they're just following orders. They're just doing a job that pays the bills, that puts food on the table, roof over the family's heads. And they probably don't want to rock up to apprehend. So, I mean, some do, some probably thrive in it, don't they? But for the most part, I'd wager a lot of officers don't want to have to arrest people based on a hurty tweet that got sent. I'm sure that isn't the case, but if they're instructed to do that, they need to follow suit. Just like they need to follow suit if it's about apprehending a criminal, an actual criminal. So I do think that the frontline officers get a lot of flack based on the higher ups.
Yeah, I mean, and just on that, Daniel, like there's officers now are often graded on arrests. So they have quotas they have to fill. So for example, it might be 5 arrests a month, it might be 5 stop searches, intel reports, traffic tickets given out. So if I'm a bobby and I get a case through my workload and I'm low on my arrests and it's a case of hurty words on Facebook, I'm more likely to stick handcuffs on than not. Because
it's easier to hit your performance.
Because you're going to be able to hit your performance review. Now that's incredibly unethical.
What is the makeup of the statistics? Like, how was it when you was in there? What are you kind of leaning towards? Like, what's the KPIs? What's that structure?
KPIs in the police, it's fucking ridiculous. It's insane. It was all the managers used to talk about. We're up on this amount of crimes. We've got this many detections this month. We've got this. We've got that. Not we've helped this many victims. We've got a really nasty bastard off the streets. It's all, oh, well, we're not doing as good as that block, or this county's got this better statistic than us. The whole emphasis when it comes to senior leadership team is on stats and numbers. It's not on the people we serve. And I saw a lot of this. And what that does as well, you remove the autonomy from the officers on the ground who go to do a good job because their hand is forced by the senior leaders who want to make the force look better by imposing these stats. I mean, fucking hell. It used to happen all the time. Trying to think. Brain fart, sorry. Can I grab a glass of water? Is that okay?
Yeah.
KPIs.
Well, the next thing I'm going to ask you about is DEI. So if you want to say something that segues into that.
DEI, okay.
Or EDI, or what is it now? It was equality, diversity, inclusivity, but it's DEI now. Which
diversity, equity and inclusion. Cheers, dude. Appreciate it. So, we good? So with the stats thing, it's you're taking away. There's no better way to make officers feel more demoralised than telling them that basically their decisions don't matter, and you don't have the backing from your sergeants and from your leaders. And if you do a really good job. So for example, I spent months dealing with a case where it was a homicide waiting to happen. It was a really, really nasty case of stalking, control and coercive behaviour. The guy was absolutely obsessed with this girl. Really nice girl as well. Absolute shame that she had to go through it all. And I managed to secure 10 charges in a night for this guy, got him remanded. And the only reason why I could get him remanded was because I knew what I was talking about, because I'd done so much training on it. The senior leaders, as you can imagine, were very happy about that. But then the next day, it's okay, well, now I've got this to deal with, And I was dealing with so many cases because when I was on frontline, you were able to make your own decisions. This whole stat thing it was always there, but it was never really rammed down your throat. So I dealt with loads of cases where I was sitting opposite them going, the only reason why you're here is because an officer needed a tick in a box. And there's cases where before cops have even gotten to the job. No one mentioned before about what happens on the call can often be quite different to what's happening in real life. Sometimes people say, oh, he's pulled out a knife to get the cops there faster. Or he's done this or he's done that. And sometimes people lie. So the cops are going to jobs, and they've even before they even got there, have got their supervisor on their phone, on the radio going, when you get there, you are going to do this, you're going to arrest. The supervisor's not even there, they're just looking at it on a screen. The cop on the ground is now being told what to do and how to do it. It's as if they just want mindless drones who arrest people, see people as numbers, and remove all empathy out of policing. And it doesn't work. You can't have police officers who feel, if I don't make this decision, I'm going to be reprimanded. And this is why I think why the quality of officer coming in now can be argued that it's much less robust, because they don't want officers thinking for themselves. You mentioned before about the fitness test, and I think one of the reasons why they're reducing that is because they want more people in. They don't want people who think for themselves. They want people with life experience. Have you heard about the degree program? What cops have to do now?
I think I've heard you speak about it in other interviews. You've got to go to university or...
Yeah, so the College of Policing basically said that all officers now have to have a degree, which alienates a lot of people who may be very, very good cops, but maybe are not very academic. So... And it's quite tight on the people who have to do the degree anyway, because not only is the degree a complete waste of time, you learn how to be a bobby by going out and being a bobby. You don't learn it in a classroom. You might learn the 10 Pelian principles or whatever, or how the police force was formed, but you're not actually learning proper policing. And as well as needing to do a degree, you then still have to work shifts. So there's that extra strain on the people as well. On top of that, you've got a 3-year probation period, so you actually have to stay on frontline longer before you can maybe specialise and move on, because typically it's 2 years for people who aren't doing the degree. It's just a complete fucking waste of time, and I don't know why they do it. But
the priorities just seem a bit out of sync, because let's make the fitness test easier so we can get people on board, but then let's also introduce a qualification that seems pretty redundant, but you need it to get in. So is that not, surely that's counteracting the simplicity of entering the force, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. Because being a cop's hard. The shifts, the lifestyle, the incidents you deal with, the trauma, the PTSD, the mental health implications, not from just what you deal with, but from working on shifts as well. You never get your body into a rhythm. If you work permanent nights, your body adjusts to that. If you're working early as for half the week and then nights the second half, or some cops do this awful 6 on 4 off where you do 2 earlys, 2 lates, 2 nights, and then you get 4 days off. You're absolutely knackered. So there's a mental health implication from that as well. Then, of course, you're not seeing your family, you're not seeing your friends, you're not having a normal life, which is also an issue when it comes to cops keeping fit and exercise, which can be really, really difficult. So there's all of this going on. Then you're saying you have to do a degree on top. And not only that, say if you've got a block of 12 cops and 4 of them are degree entries, that means for so many months of the year, them 4 need to go back to university, which means the other 8 officers on that block then have to work more. So they have to carry and progress the officers' workload because they're at university. And it also means when it comes to calls, they have to respond to more calls. So they're getting burnt out more as well. So by bringing in people for the university degree, we're not only making cops do a pointless degree, we're also putting additional strain on the cops who are currently there, which means a worse service to the public, which means more cops are getting burnt out, which means more mental health issues. And you also attract another kind of demographic to people into the service, people who just want a free degree. They turn up, they don't have to pay, they don't have to go to uni, as in they don't have to pay uni fees. They get to be a police officer for 3 or 4 years, then they leave. It's like, thanks. And when it comes to, just I mentioned before about pay, I remember speaking to a Bobby who did the degree program. They did the police for 4 years. They then left, and then they became a manager at a B&M, and they're on the same money. So what incentive is there to keep cops there? And I mentioned about DEI in the book as well, and just on about training. I remember doing a specialist course in domestic violence in control and coercive behaviour. I had to proper fight to get on it because it was quite a competitive course, but because of, I proved myself with my things, I was able to do it. The first half was about control and coercive behaviour. The second half was entirely to do with DEI. So it was about people's lived experiences. It was about pronouns. It was about, different cultures and that sort of thing. It was how to identify, maybe you might enter into an African household or a Muslim household or whatever, and maybe it's more patriarchal as compared. I'm like, what the fuck's this got to do with anything? Why am I learning about respecting people's pronouns? I want to know, are you being abused? I want to know what the dynamic is like in your house. It was very little actually about how to identify control and coercive behaviour now that I think about it. I remember sitting there going, I haven't actually learned anything about this other than to ask someone's fucking pronouns when I walk through the door.
All that time you've spent learning this, you could have been improving your fitness. You could have been on a totally relevant course. See, what frustrates me with the whole EDI, DEI is a lot of companies, it's infiltrated from this woke culture, which seems to be, well, I said this a couple of years ago, it seems to be dying off, and then it's skyrocketed again, so I don't want to jinx it. But what's quite frustrating is I'm quite fortunate in a sense. I'm well travelled. I've been to various different cultures. I love embedding myself in the cultures and seeing the world. And I realise I'm very privileged to be able to say that. But what's an insult to mine, yours, and other people's intelligence is, why do we need to be taught how to respect other human beings? Like, I don't look at someone based on the colour of skin. Well, it's cliche to sound this, but I genuinely don't. I don't look at whatever the religious beliefs are. It's irrelevant. If you're a good human being and respect is reciprocated both ways, then I'm happy to treat you as a human being. I don't then need to be taught and lectured, and I'm speaking on behalf of all the people here, on someone's pronouns or someone's religious beliefs. Okay, that's their prerogative. I just want to speak to someone as an individual. And the fact that this is really concerning, that this has embedded itself in the police force, where your objective is to go and eliminate the crime or apprehend the perpetrator, the criminal, and yet you need to learn about what their environment might be like. Yeah. That's mental.
It's sensitivities. And it's also the police now, I think because we're a public organisation, they've been captured by this they say it's left-wing way of thinking, this woke way of thinking. I know cops that explicitly stated that they were gay on their form because they knew that'll give me a leg up. Like, obviously they were gay, they weren't lying, but the very fact they had to say, well, I mentioned that I was gay on my application form because I knew that, well, that would put me above somebody else. And I mean, I'm all for different people from different cultures and backgrounds when joining the police, because you're supposed to be representing the public, and the public is diverse, so the police force needs to be diverse. But you don't hire people at the expense of the expertise or the meritocracy of other people in something like the police. You want the best person for the job, regardless of whether that person is black, gay, trans, whatever. No one gives a shit. I don't care whether the cop turning up to help me is gay or trans. I don't care.
You want someone
Can they help me in the way I want them to help me? And that should be the answer. That should be what officers are hired on.
Well, going back onto the free speech, Joey Barton, the footballer, he's been quite vocal about this with the football commentary and women commentating on male football matches. Look, whatever your opinion is on that, I don't think it warrants. I mean, he might have used certain phrases. I've not been following the case, but I do agree with the point he's making about what you've just to echo what you've said there, is it shouldn't matter what your ethnicity is, what your protected characteristic is. It should matter that you're competent and able, physically able to do the job, especially when it comes to policing.
It puts people off joining because they think, well, I'm not going to get the job because I'm a straight white man, for example. It also makes the people who join and who got the job because of their excellence, who potentially are gay or black or whatever, makes them feel, did I only get this job because of my immutable characteristic? And when it comes to the public, you may get someone going, the only reason why you're sat in front of me is because you have this protected characteristic, not because of how good you are. So what we've done is, by trying to make the force more inclusive, we potentially made a worse force because we're not hiring the right people, because we're not grading people off how good they are and how good an officer they will be. We're also then training the public to potentially view the police officer in front of them as someone who was potentially a DEI hire rather than the best person for the job. I think it's wrong.
The irony that diversity is the greatest strength.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Clearly. I think unity is the greatest strength, and that includes whatever your background is. You need to be, you need to be able to do the job as a collective. The biggest skill you need to be a cop is be able to talk to people. Mm-hmm. The amount of times I've turned up to incidents where somebody was kicking their fuck off and I've just managed to talk to them, treat them like a human being, and we've been able to sort it out, or even if they were getting lifted, they've not booted off. Don't get me wrong, sometimes, no matter how much you talk to somebody, they're going to want to fight you. And you've got to be able to back yourself up a little bit, in particular if you're on your own. But it's not what you're looking, it's not who you decide to go to bed with. It's not what your background is. It's what are you able to speak to somebody on a human level, relate to them, give a bit of empathy, break down those barriers. I've dealt with people before who said, prior to meeting you, I fucking hated the police. They're actually not too bad. Well, you're not too bad. And it's like, great, I've done a good job there because I broke down those barriers. And even if it was a case of us potentially nicking them or giving them some bad news or there to help them, because I didn't just see my uniform as I'm the police, you do as I say, which oftentimes cops like that are the ones who get assaulted the most because they rely on their authority of the uniform rather than their personal human skills. And I remember, I won't name or anything like that, but I remember dealing with an officer. There was an officer on my block who I believe got the job because they had a particular characteristic, because they were fucking awful at the job. They spoke to people like shit. They spoke to supervisors like shit. They were terrible at managing the workload. They were unfit. They were nothing what a good bobby should be, this person was. But I think it was because they had this particular characteristic. And the force would be they'd find it very difficult to get rid of someone like that, because then they can claim discrimination. You're only getting rid of me because of this. You're only getting rid of me because of that. So when we hire people based off immutable characteristics rather than the meritocracy, we actually make it harder to get rid of them because they can fall back on that and say, you're only saying this because of X, Y, and Z. Which is then, this means these people are being paid for by the public and are being potentially given a really bad service to the public, when there could be somebody else who also applied for that job who would have been miles much better suited. But because we are trying to make this inclusive workforce, we're giving a worse service to everyone involved. And I don't think that's okay. I think it should be, if you're hiring for Microsoft or you're hiring for Starbucks or something like that, make your workforce as diverse as you want. All what will happen is someone maybe gets a bit of shit customer service, or they get a bad cup of coffee. We're dealing with people's lives. We're dealing with, some might never ring the police. Some might only ever ring the police once, but that one time really matters. And if they get somebody who doesn't have a clue what they're doing, speak to people like shit, and have this air of arrogance because they know they can't be gotten rid of because they were hired for the wrong reasons, that means that person who's encountered the police that day is going to go, I'm not ringing the police again because it's a waste of time. Whereas if someone like me or you who would be very good at doing the job, might go and make a massive difference to that person's lives because we were hired for the right reasons, because we had the right quality of person. We were the right quality people to become bobbers. And like I said, you can't learn that in a classroom. You learn that from, you have to have something about you. You can't be scared of telling someone something they don't want to hear. You can't be scared of getting your hands on if necessary. And you have to be able to deal with what's in front of you. If afterwards, because I get a lot of people saying, oh, cops are too soft now because, they need more mental health support and stuff. And I don't agree with that. I think if you're an officer that goes to an incident and you're crumbling at the sight of something, okay. I've had to have it where, I've gone to something really nasty, I've dealt with it, and then afterwards I've just needed a minute because, maybe weighs on you. I've had colleagues who were very, very good officers who've gone to something, dealt with it, and then afterwards just like, I just need fucking half an hour. That's completely fine.
But then I hear stories of officers who, you know, they've been hired and they need an emotional support bear, as an emotional support teddy bear.
Teddy bear.
Yeah. Or they need a blanket. They can put a blanket over the head if they're feeling anxious and they don't have to go out to any calls.
Has anyone ever asked for an emotional bag of dicks?
Thankfully not.
No. Just to kind of, obviously you touched on sort of like the EDI or the DEI taking precedence. On the flip side of that, two-tier policing.
Mm-hmm.
Is that a thing?
It is. It is a thing. Probably not in the way you think, though.
Do you want to elaborate?
No, actually, no.
No. I'll make for a lame end to the interview, but no. Please do. So,
two-tier policing. So people believe that it's to do with, and of course this does happen, where we look at one particular group gets treated more harshly than another group. The evidence is there that does happen. Is that something which is rammed down every cop's throat? Don't arrest him because he's this and arrest this person because of that. No. Officers aren't briefed during the day and say, okay, if we get any right-wing activists today who are all white and bald and, you know, wearing Union Jacks, go hard on them. But if we get people from a mosque who are causing issues, don't go hard on them. Doesn't happen. Senior leaders senior leadership might make that decision in the moment, and then that is perceived as two-tier police. And I've spoken to loads of officers when I was interviewing for that book and the next book, said, is it a thing in your force? 99% of them have said no. One said yes. And that was an officer in a very large metropolitan force, said they went to an incident where there was a white Eastern European person arguing with a Asian male. The white European was the victim, but he was arrested because they didn't want to upset racial tensions. So it was easier to arrest the white person rather than the Asian person. That's the only incident I've heard of that happening. Where two-tier policing is absolutely a thing is when it becomes to men and women. So I spoke to somebody recently who worked in a sexual assault rape unit. They said the amount of men who are currently on bail and for rape, and they have concrete evidence it's malicious, is staggering. They said out of, say, all their cases, maybe about 60% of the cases they have are probably malicious, or they can prove that it didn't happen. The police will not want to NFA a potential sexual assault because sexual assaults and rape cases get charged so little.
Just for clarity, NFA, no further action.
No further action, okay. Sorry. They wouldn't want to close those cases down because if there's the slightest opportunity of getting a detection, they'll go for it. Especially when you consider how hard a rape case is to prove, because often there's only two people in that room. One person said it was consensual, the other person doesn't. If it's one word against the other, it's not going anywhere. This officer said that there were loads of cases where men are being kept on bail when they know full well that it's not happened. But when it comes to the women making the allegations, they will not prosecute them. There was one person in particular who I think has made 11 false allegations of rape in 6 weeks. That's 11 men have been arrested, 11 men on bail, 11 men potentially having their lives ruined. This woman who keeps making these allegations will not be prosecuted for perverting the course of justice because the CPS do not want to prosecute people for making false rape allegations. For whatever reason, whether that's because they don't want to potentially put real victims off, they don't want people to think they won't be believed, whether it's because the whole remit of violence against women and girls, which has been turned into a huge stat manipulation thing in domestic violence cases. This is what happened to me. So I was assaulted by my ex-partner. I had to strike her back to get her to stop. I rang the police, blood running down my face, rang the police and they said, my ex-partner just attacked me. She's still here. She's drunk. You can hear her on the phone call. She's still screaming at me. They said they're not coming. 2 days later, she makes a counter allegation. I'm arrested. All got NFA'd and I sued the police force for it. That is a carbon copy of loads of cases I've dealt with where the man is clearly the victim, but the woman has made a counter allegation. Sometimes what can happen as well is the male is a victim of domestic assault. They leave. And then when they report it to the police go speak to the woman. The woman says, well, actually, I was raped last week. She's then not investigated and the male's arrested for rape. So when it comes to the violence against women and girls remit we hear so much about, which I do think is incredibly important, because like I said repeatedly, I used to deal with that a lot and I was very passionate about it. It's also being abused by the system too, in that if a man and a woman make the same allegation of maybe domestic assault, it's often the woman that is believed rather than the man, even if the man is the one covered in bruises, scratches, blooded, has got ripped clothing. And like I said, they contacted the police, dealt with loads of cases like that. Like I said, I've been a victim of that sort of thing as well. So two-tier policing, two-tier courts, I think, exist because they are quite politically influenced, even though they shouldn't be. When we see cases of a man who strangled his missus after death gets a suspended sentence, and somebody who posts something on X gets fucking 4 years in prison, how are them two even comparable in the sense of harm? But we can argue political influence from the courts there. So I think two-tier courts definitely exist. Day-to-day two-tier policing, I don't believe exists. But in the guise of sexual assault, rape, and violence against women and girls, I absolutely do think it does, yeah.
It's interesting. I've covered quite a eclectic mix of interviews covering the grooming gangs, and it's interesting how the perpetrators are typically male, but yet they seem to be a bit more protected rather than the females. But I think that ties into the DEI aspect, because fundamentally the majority of them are Pakistani Muslim men. So there's sort of protected characteristics.
I think it's like cultural sensitivities there, isn't it? It's much more complex, that issue. The cases I'm talking about are generally just isolated. It's that family, those two people. When we talk about such things like the grooming gangs, we're talking about a much broader spectrum of people. Much wider acts of perpetration of people who, on the whole, belong to a particular ethnic group. So the whole reasons why the grooming gang was covered up as much as it was because they didn't want to upset racial tensions, didn't want to upset that. So it makes sense that if the institutions and organisations don't want to appear racist, they're not going to persecute the actual perpetrators. They're going to maybe blame the victims instead because of their behaviour. And I mean, I've not looked loads into it, but I'm sure when you've spoken to other people from it, a lot of the girls and a lot of the victims...
There's a common thread with what you're saying, so based on what...
A lot of the girls and stuff tend to come from quite difficult and troubled backgrounds as well, so it's easy to look at them and go, well, you're the problem because you're out doing this and doing that. So let's point the finger at you rather than actually look at the bigger issue here, what we have. And
even if, because we interviewed Sammy Woodhouse and she didn't come from a troubled background, but the line they sort of threw at her was lifestyle choice. You've chose to integrate with those people. You've chose to drink. You've chose to do X, Y, Z. So, yeah.
Well, that's how grooming works, isn't it? They bring you in.
Yeah, we'll deflect all that and just go with. So it just seems like the waters are very muddy from top to bottom. I mean, I asked this, can people trust the police now?
You can trust the individual officer. The individual officer who turns up to your house has, they are doing their best. They have the fucking deck stacked against them, whether that's resources, whether they're being pressured under targets, all sorts of things. But they turn up to your house to give you the best support possible. They turn up to your house to help you. The police is an organisation. You are a number. And based off the political... feeling, based off the supervisor who's in charge of that shift, of that officer who comes, your fate was probably decided before that officer even turned up to your house. So the individual officers, brilliant people, amazing people for the most part. Obviously there's some bad ones, some people who shouldn't be in for whatever reason, but majority of them absolutely fantastic, absolutely have your best interests at heart and want to do a good job. The organisation as a whole, very difficult to say. Depends, like I said, on what the political feeling is that day.
Yeah. I think there's too much politics, not enough reality in the force. I just think, I understand there needs to be a level of politics to be able to enforce the law. But I do think, like, for instance, with the free speech, so America have the Second Amendment, so free speech is very much upheld, I should say, there. Whereas over here, we don't seem to have any concrete ruling on it. We've got a ruling with loads of caveats, so that's why they're able to flip flop on how the severity of the.
I remember seeing a meme and it said the UK has free speech and will arrest anyone who says otherwise.
Yeah, I think I've seen that. So what fundamentally, what just kind of summarise, what is the key thing, or maybe there's multiple, but what's the key thing that straight away needs to change to improve?
Stop policing via statistics.
Statistics
Stop
are playing a
policing
big
via
part.
stats. Stats corrupt organisations. They corrupt people. People manipulate them for their own career prospects. Treat people as people. Don't treat people as numbers. You're not numbers on a spreadsheet. Somebody's potentially having the worst day of their life, and you need an officer there who's trained properly, who knows what they're doing, who isn't just part of the latest churn of officers, an officer who feels looked after, supported, respected, and capable of helping you. So yeah, treat cops better. Let cops make their own decisions. They're fucking trained for a reason. Let cops make their own decisions. Stop with the political influence, even if that's just internal politics, because the supervisor over here wants a promotion. So they're pushing for a certain action when that cop gets to the home. It all needs to stop. Let the officer at the scene make that decision, make them accountable to that decision, and support that officer in that decision. That's how it was when I first started. And it was great. And I got a lot of good results. Morale was good. There were lots of experienced officers on the block because you turn up to work and you dealt with an incident and you dealt with it properly and you felt good about the decision what you'd made. Didn't always get it right. Sometimes, maybe you should have done something a bit different, but you learn. And your supervisors had your back because they weren't under so much pressure for the people above them who were gunning for a promotion to make sure certain decisions happens. So, but again, that goes back to stats. Stats is a massive issue in the service.
We need to humanise the
service, yeah, 100%.
Until that happens, the job will remain fucked, I think, is appropriate way. Jay, I've loved chatting to you, mate.
Enjoyed it.
A lot of the stuff that you've highlighted, you've reaffirmed a lot of things for me, and I'm sure the listeners will have that. Obviously, we've got one last question that we ask everyone, but before we come to that, how can people, obviously everything will be in the description anyway, but what's your preferred way of people contacting you? Where can they purchase your book? I'm
very active on Instagram. That tends to be my main social media of choice. Very active on there. I have a YouTube channel, Jay Darkmoore. I'm also launching a support group for police officers, for shift workers, which which I'll send you the links for that as well. It's like a monthly thing. People can join. There'll be all sorts on there for making sure you're strong, you're good, your mental health's good, and also if you wanted to leave the job, how to do that, how to maybe build a business as well. The book is available. You can get a signed copy from a website, or you can go on Amazon. It's available on audio as well. But you'll find everything.
Do you narrate it on the audio as well?
Unfortunately, no. I'm going to narrate the next one.
Okay.
But I basically doesn't have all the setup for that, so I hired a narrator. He's very good though. Okay. He is very good.
Yeah. See, I don't listen to audiobooks purely because I listen to podcasts. So.
Does audiobooks count as reading? Controversial.
I mean, if you fully, I've seen the whole thing for reading. I don't want to go down this rabbit hole now, but the whole idea of reading for me is you're fully engaged and you're absorbing the information. And if you read a good book, like this one, if you read a good book, you're dialed in and you're paying attention, and depending on how creative you are, you can visualize. Whereas I think if you're just listening, I don't know. Like I even though I do podcast, I typically listen to podcasts to fall asleep.
Okay.
I mean, I might put one on a run or in the gym or something. But in answer to your question, I think me personally, I like to read than I do listen. Anyway, digress. So last question, we ask this to all our guests. What does challenge mean to Jay Darkmoore?
So every day I need to get up and I need to overcome what's called resistance. And I read a book by Stephen Pressfield called The War of Art. And resistance is the thing which is saying don't do it. Whether that's you're too tired, whether that's you maybe get a bit of brain fog, maybe that's you don't feel confident to go out your comfort zone to do something, it's resistance. So, for example, in the morning, I like to get up, I like to have a cold shower. I don't want to have a cold shower. I fucking hate having a cold shower. But if I don't have one, then that resistance wins. And when I sit down to do some writing or come and do an interview or, do whatever, there's always that bit of part of you going, maybe you're anxious, maybe you're nervous, maybe you're not sure. It's overcoming that. And the more you overcome that, the more you overcome the challenge of creativity, of career, of physical, physical prowess. I don't know what the fucking word is. Physical challenge or going to the gym. So for me, challenge is, it doesn't have to be anything big. It can just be getting that task done. It could be washing the dishes before you go to bed. You got a big pile of dishes after your meal. Challenge is doing that. It's not taking the easy route. It's being uncomfortable. It's finding, it's overcoming that resistance. That's what I think challenge is.
Quite a powerful way to end it, mate. And obviously you've overcome plenty of challenges in the force, as highlighted in the book, The Job's Fucked. And your next book is?
The System's Fucked.
System's Fucked. When's that due to come out?
Fuck knows. I'm aiming for April, but we'll see.
We'll see. Well, whenever it comes out, I'm sure we can rearrange to do another one, mate. Jay, it's been a pleasure, mate. Have you had a good time?
It's been great.
Fantastic.
Been lovely.
I've been Daniel Hodges. This has, of course, been Jay Darkmoore, and you've been listening to the Hodge-Cast. Take it easy. Thanks for listening. We hope you enjoyed this episode, and we believe you can definitely take something away from today's guest. We couldn't attract guests such as this without a solid fan base. The best way we can grow this is through subscriptions. So, if you haven't already done so, can I please ask you hit that subscribe button and help us continue to put out content for you all to enjoy. Until next time.